"Jack, I need you to get these things off my 6. Derek Johnson commanded, his voice tense with concentration. Jack Kingston quickly located his squad leader, about 5,000 feet below him. He was being chased by dozens of the drones that swarmed all across the skies over the ruins of Los Angeles. Derek was outpacing the things, but not by much. If they caught him, well, Jack had seen firsthand what would happen. He never wanted to witness it again, either. Almost 10 minutes before, Eagle Squadron had engaged the alien vessel. They had executed a perfect attack run, focusing their compact railguns' hail of fire at the great craft's center of mass. Hundreds of slugs fired, and not a single one hit home. Instead, at about 500 meters from their target, they suddenly and inexplicably redirected course down and away from the hull of the alien ship. Jack thought he saw the air flare with energy in the areas. The slugs were focused, but at his speed, it was impossible to know for sure. Still, the implications were not reassuring. Jack had gritted his teeth and pulled hard on his control stick. The G-forces were sudden and crushing. As Eagle broke off, splitting apart their formation like a hand opening up in all directions, they must have crossed some distance threshold, because the swarm of drones suddenly took notice and began pursuit. They caught up to Marcus before he even had a chance to accelerate. Jack had watched in abject horror as the drones attached themselves to his comrade's FX-17. "What the fuck?" Screech yelled as the machines bored into the hull of his fighter. Then, something far worse happened. The drones turned a bright red and the hull around them melted like butter. Within a heartbeat, the entire jet was nothing more than a ball of superheated metals, vapors, and what had once been a pilot from Detroit. Kamikaze drones. Fucking hell. Jack added a new least favorite way to die to his mental list. There was no time to think about Marcus. The drones were keeping pace with all of them. At every turn, they cut the corner a little tighter and closed the distance between their sleek gray-black form and Eagle Squadron. The simple systems within each of the drones kept unblinking eyes on their targets. From that point forward, the 4 remaining members of Eagle Squadron could do nothing more than attempt to outrun and outmaneuver the clearly more advanced drones. For 8 long minutes, they tried to hold the sky above the graveyard of melted mega skyscrapers. For 8 long minutes, Eagle Eye Kingston pushed his fighter to the breaking point and executed every maneuver he knew. Find the weakness. Find the damn weakness. He glanced at the massive craft that now obstructed the sun. Its silhouette was so dark that it was difficult to see any details on the vessel's surface. Jack turned back to locate the other pilots. Talon had managed to outrun the drones chasing him and was attempting to blast apart the ones on Cassandra's 6 with his cannons. Unlike the larger vessel, the drones didn't appear to have shielding. They were shredded by the 14 rail guns and vaporized by the headwind pocket missiles that the FX-17s carried. "Die, you motherfuckers," Talon shouted over the comms as he burned through precious ammunition. The drones obliged. "Jack," Derek shouted, no longer keeping his cool composure. "I can't shake them, I need you to engage." Eagle Eye pressed the throttle as far down as it would go. The engine readouts displayed before his eyes told him that the heat buildup was reaching critical levels in the dual super turbines that powered his jet. In the back of his mind, he hoped they could handle just a little bit more. "I'm on my way," Jack spoke strained into the comms. "On my mark, bank hard right." The kamikaze drones were so close to Derek Johnson's thrusters that Jack could see them glowing a dull orange from the heat. He was afraid that was just a precursor of what was soon to come, unless he could find an angle to engage. Eagle Eye felt the adrenaline flowing through his veins. Everything seemed to stand still. Thud. His heart seemed to beat so slowly. Thud. The scene was so unreal. Behind him, 40 drones were advancing closer and closer to his fighter. Thud. Above him, he could see it all so clearly. The turrets lining the alien warship began to light up and track his squadron's remaining fighters. Thud. Eagle Eye saw his opening. "Mark," he cried. Derek banked right hard. The drones followed suit, the closest ones only inches from the tail of his fighter. Jack pressed down on the red button, situated on the right side of his control stick. 14 railguns opened a torrent of fire. The sound in the cockpit was deafening. Where Derek had been only an instant before, the drones began to explode in angry fireballs. Jack had no time to turn. He flew through the cloud of debris he had just created at a breakneck pace. The sound of metal hailing across his fighter's hull echoed in the small space where Jack Kingston sat. He lost almost all of his front-facing cameras. Then he lost his two tail fins and began to spiral. Fuck, fuck, fuck. Sirens informed him that his engines were failing and that the superstructure of the fighter was damaged. One piece of information stood out from the rest. Eject. Offline. The heads-up display told him in blinking red letters. Then he heard it, several thuds across his hull. The drones had caught up with him. They began to bore into the interior. The screeching of metal on metal was unbelievably painful to hear. Jack winced. Eject. Offline. The world slowed to a standstill. Jack took one last look at the beautiful blue sky. At least, the parts of it that still displayed on the cockpit's inner wall. They were a kind of cruel patchwork. Spaces of curved metal separated them from one another and tarnished his view. The swarm of drones had found new targets in the arriving squadrons. They were speaking over the comms, but Jack hadn't been listening. Instead, he watched the glowing guns on the alien vessel above. The turrets on the warship opened fire. 3 shots, 3 kills. The first ripped Talon's right wing clean off. The second blew a hole through the turbines of Cassandra's fighter and melted them to slag. The third hit Derek's cockpit. The entire jet exploded in a bright ball of flame. Jack tried to fight the spiral, but it was useless. There was only one thing left to do. With what little control Jack had left, he angled his fighter straight at the alien warship. Guess I won't be getting that beer after all, Jack realized. Then, he noted something else. The sound of screeching metal had stopped. There was only blissful silence. Then the drones turned a blinding red. A second later, a ball of molten metal traveling at Mach 7 cut through the warship's shields and collided with its hull. The alien vessel shuddered from the force of the impact. Jack Kingston's last thought was of Cassandra's beautiful smile. The author's name and the link to original text is in the description. Consider tapping the thumbs up and pressing the subscribe button if you enjoyed this video.